Hi, I'm Tori Hageman, and I'm getting ready to jump on this large painting, and I'm so excited about the photo reference, and it's full of some of my favorite colors. And typically on larger paintings, I tend to speed them up considerably, put some pretty music to the background, and let you just kick back and enjoy. But I'm going to treat this one like it's a real tutorial. I'm going to slow it down, show you the brushwork, show you the paints that I'm using, and take you through step by step how I'm actually going to do this large painting. And I'm going to use a technique that is quickly becoming my very favorite, and I think it's something that will appeal to both acrylic and oil painters, and that is I'm going to do the block-in stage in acrylics and then go over it in oils. I've done the last few paintings that way, and oh my gosh, I just love the results. So that's what I'm going to do for this one. I hope you'll stay tuned. When I'm planning to do a painting in two stages with an acrylic block-in and oils on top, the first thing I do is figure out what is the final oil color going to be. So I look at my paints and I decide what I want to use where. Like I'm going to use permanent rose for that watermelon. I'm going to use cad yellow medium and yellow ochre or raw sienna for the lemons. And I work through that, and then from that I go to my acrylic paints and I find paints that are close to what those final colors are going to be. Interestingly enough, I really thought that I wanted to do a soft turquoisey color in the foreground, and I went ahead and blocked in the foreground, and then once I saw it with the green in the background, I just didn't like it. I felt like the foreground needed to be warm. So as I often do with my paintings, if I see something that I don't like, I changed it. So let me just start with the block in, and I'll show you the colors as we work through. Since I ended up changing that foreground, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I was using cerulean blue, cad yellow, medium, and white to get the foreground and to get the background in the green. And I'm using a Richardson Gray Matters palette. It's just a slick gray paper. I'm using that for both my acrylics and my oil paints, and it's a nice size to hold in my hand. And I often will, when I'm starting a painting, I'm trying to work through the colors, I'll take my palette knife and mix some colors, and then I'll just lay those on the canvas with my palette knife and see if I like how those things are looking before I commit to making a big pile and putting in the paint. Keep in mind that everything that's going on this block-in stage is eventually going to be covered up. So I'm using a big Rosemary & Company classic long flat brush. I am putting a lot of paint on there. I'm just scrubbing that brush into the canvas. I'm not being real precise about it. It's important to get the block-in stage, I feel, since I want this to be a loose painting, I want the block-in stage to be loose as well. So I very quickly just started laying in those colors, scrubbing them in. Again, not doing any kind of precise brush work, just trying to get the canvas covered at this point. So let me next, I'm just going to put in the watermelon color and the lemons and the shadow of the plate. And I'm probably going to put that lemonade off till last because I'm still not quite sure what I'm going to do with that. But again, this is just the block-in. And you can tell how lightly and roughly I scrub that paint in. And you notice that it's not all the same color. And when I put the background in oils, I'm very intentionally going to be picking up slightly different piles of color because I want to have an interesting background. So that is the first part of stage one. Stay tuned. I do want to mention for the lemons, I think I've decided that I'm going to just use, this is a Rosemary & Company ivory long flat, so you'll notice the end is much more precise. I'm going to go ahead and use that just to get these lemons in, and I'm going to kind of get the main brightest yellow in the body. I'll go to a lighter yellow at the top, and I'm going to use my raw umber, yellow oxide, something like that. I used to use too much just pure yellow, and I have found getting the bottoms of these much darker makes it look a whole lot more realistic. So I'm just, again, you know, this is not the final coat. I'm just trying to kind of get some color notes and get a direction of where I'm going. I redrew these lemons a little bit from the way they were in the photograph. I think this outside edge where is very important. This edge here is very important. So they had one sticking way out that I thought looked kind of odd, and it was distracting, and it was leading your eye off the canvas. I want your eye to stay pointed into the center, so I'm trying not to do anything terribly distracting out here at the side. So that's all that I'm going to do with the bright yellow lemon. Let's try some, I'm going to drop down to raw sienna, which is really, I think of that as a brown. And I'm going to mix some raw sienna with my yellow. And let's just see, isn't that pretty? But that'll definitely give you a nice shadow. I did not put any type of slow dry medium in this, so this isn't blending particularly smoothly. But when we go over it with oils, it will blend like butter. Can always drop some yellow back, bleed that kind of back, push that back down into that. I think this is looking good already. Don't be afraid to really get some darks in on these lemons. That's what's going to give it shape. Might go even darker than that before it's all said and done, but and now I'm going to take some of this cad yellow and some white, and I'm just going to make, I've got a little bit of green in there, but it's okay. And I'm just going to make a lighter value, and that's going to go on the top. I do have a touch of green on my brush. That's okay. And I'm not going to worry about the highlights until we do that second coat. I like for things to overlap. Like, I think that's important to have this overlapping here. And the same is going to be true. Like, I love the watermelon in front of the picture. I like the little ends of the lemons, and getting some little shadows there. But, you know, again, we can really develop that a lot more when we get into our final coat. We'll have to figure out what to do with some of these spaces to kind of Okay. You know, one of the many reasons I'm enjoying using the acrylic for the undercoat, there's just something really freeing about this, because I know this isn't the final coat. It keeps it loose. It keeps me from fussing over things and worrying about them too much, because I know this isn't the final coat. And it's just helping me kind of get a roadmap of where I'm going. And then and get that real dark. And then when you get to the oils, it's just like the whipped cream. And you've already worked through this. You already kind of have a roadmap. And so it's just a lot more fun and loose, because you're not having to figure those things out as you go. I'm just a really happy camper doing this. If you've never painted in oils, if you know, for me, I used to paint in oils. When I first started painting, I painted in oils and acrylic. And I found oils very difficult. I really struggled with them. But doing this method, this takes that struggle out. I'm not wrestling with problems with the undertones. It just seems a lot easier to me. So let's get these lemons that are now cut. And they're kind of dark. It's good that I dropped down to this kind of brush. I would have trouble doing this with that big brush I was using. And then this is going to be kind of a white. I think I'm going to go, while I have the yellow out, I'm going to go ahead and do I'm going to go ahead and just kind of drop in a color note. And these lemons go slightly above the waterline. This one is real dark. For the undercoat for the watermelon, I'm going to use this Napthol Crimson. I think that's the closest thing that I have. It's a little orange. I've just squeezed it out on my tube, and it's really too orange. So I'm going to add a little quinacridone magenta. It's a real purpley red, but I felt it was too purpley red. So again, it's just the undercoat. But let me see, by mixing these two, what we can come up with. I want it to be, that's just too purpley of a red. It's a little dark as well. Let me add a little white. I don't want it to turn pink or chalky looking. So I'm just well, that's still reading very pink, but again, that's the undercoating. I think we're okay. You notice I'm going back to my big brush. I'm just scrubbing this in. There's a color called Milky White. This is Master's Touch. That comes from Hobby Lobby. I might try to just put that in just for the run real quick. And I'm going to drop back. And that's going to be 2 creams. So I'm probably going to mix that with some white to do the run. And I am going to drop down to a smaller brush because I'm going to try to keep that. Let me adjust this camera for you. Well, I decided after all that I was going to work on the bowl. And usually when I'm trying to do something that's white that looks like it has a shadow, I'll either use light blue violet as the shadow, or I'll make a gray using burnt umber, ultramarine, and white. But I thought since I had used the burnt sienna, the raw sienna, I'm sorry, since I'd used the raw sienna in the lemons, I thought it might be interesting to try that with the ultramarine and white and just see what I come up with. So here I had the ultramarine, the raw sienna, and white, and made a very dark gray, but here I've lightened it, and I'm going to just try that and see how that reads. We can always not really liking this brush, so let's go to a more of a scrubbing kind of brush. And I've been trying to paint the sides of the canvas while I'm at it. I got that really wet. It'll be too wet. So let me add a lot more white to that and see if we can, it's still pretty dark. And then a whole lot of white. Just taking that same pile and just putting a lot of white in there. In the photograph it had these little dots in it. I don't know if I'm going to try to do that with this or not. And so we want to push that. I've got a lot of white on my brush and I'm just kind of pushing it back into that gray just to get a soft transition. What do you think? If you looked at this color, well, you are looking at it next to a pure white, it still looks pretty gray. And here we've got my pencil lines showing through, but I just put too much water in that. That's why that's acting weird. I'm going to take just some pure white on my brush, nothing else, and drop it back in and see if we can't lighten this front edge considerably. And I want the edge around the very top to have a highlight. I don't have my photo reference with me, but as I recalled, it had a real white edge and then a little shadow underneath, and I need to get my reference before I... Well, I've gotten away from this overnight, which helps me a lot. And I don't like this value and this value being so similar. I think they're similar in color. And I realized in thinking about it, I think my preference is if I'm going to have a cool color above, I like having a warm color below and vice versa. So what I think I'm going to do, there's a white cloth here. I'm going to enlarge that so it's over here. And then we've got this cloth over here. So we've really just got a wedge in the middle that, again, is pointing right to this. And I think I'm going to try doing like a pale pink over white and try to get rid of this. So I'm going to pull this white out and enlarge it and get this. I just feel like for my brain, I need to see that better before I continue on with the painting. So let me do that next step and then I'll show you where we are. So I've just drawn a new line here for this fabric edge, trying to get kind of an interesting line. And I'm using heavy body titanium white paint to go over this. And it'll take a couple of coats, but at least if you use the heavy body titanium, that's pretty good about blocking out what's underneath it. So I've decided I am going to go back to the same mixture of white, ultramarine, and the burnt umber. That's not what that is. I always have trouble with that. It's the raw sienna. Sorry, raw sienna. But I'm going to make it a little lighter than the bowl. So let me do that real quick. I want it to look like a white bowl, but you can tell compared to that, it still has some color in it. I'm going to lay that in, and then I'm still going to try to use the light blue violet in the shadows and do the darkest shadows with the ultramarine. So let's just drop that in. I'm going to go back to a little bit straighter brush just because I've got a lot of kind of angles here I need to maneuver. I didn't draw that in very well. I got it a little too pointed, but we'll fix that. We've got a pretty white edge going on here. And then it gets really dark at the bottom. So I'm going to add a little more ultramarine, a little more of this. It doesn't look dark enough. I don't want it to go brown, so I'm gonna, you know, we have the blue and the orange going on in this painting. Those are complements, so I can add a little orange to gray that down. That keeps it a fairly warm shadow. Let me add a little more blue and just keep tweaking that. Let me see how that looks. That's pretty. There's a spot here that's even darker. And there's one little line right there. It's not nearly as bright as this top line, but it's a lot lighter than the other. So I'm just going to mix these two together, lighten that line up. All right, the shadow that's right underneath is super dark. I'm just going to do the blue and the brown. I have a little white on my brush, but I said I was going to use that light blue violet, but it's just not dark enough. So sometimes I have to just kind of think through things. We have a shadow right here that's not nearly as dark as this, and it's lighter than that, but it's darker than that. So again, just kind of taking my piles and finding something in the middle there. Okay, got a pretty dark spot right there. And right here. That dark actually comes all the way to the edge of the plate. It's funny, there's some spots under here that are significantly lighter. You wouldn't think it could be that light underneath, but it is. There's a dark spot right there. And again, it's a lot darker right there. I'm just in pure ultramarine at this point. And that shadow stays super dark under there, so I'm just staying with the pure ultramarine at this point. And that shadow goes all the way to there. The shadow gets just slightly lighter as it moves out, so I'm taking our ultramarine. I'm just going to go back to our light gray, put the tiniest bit in that, maybe just a little bit more, keeping that pretty dark, but definitely a lighter value. This brush isn't doing a great job of filling in the little white dots on this canvas. So I'm going to take our table color, this orangey pink, and I'm going to add the complement of that orange, which is the blue, to gray it down to get it dark enough. And it's a really dark shadow, so that is not dark enough. Really dark up under there. Really dark right here. Just kind of gives us a mark. Of where those folds are. So we're also going to have folds on this other side up in here. It's funny how just a little line, a little dark line along the edge of something can really give the sense of fabric. And a little interest over on this side. I think the next thing I'm going to tackle is this lemonade. And I think I put it off to last because I just wasn't sure. I really like the slices of lemons in there, and I think I might add another lemon slice or two showing from the back. Might even do a round one in the glass. I just think that's kind of a cool look. So let me do that real quick. So I'm going to take a little bit of that cerulean blue and yellow and a ton of white. It almost looks blue looking through that glass. I'm going to try let me just lay this in. Well, I think that's pretty. And this bottom gets pretty white. Plus we've got the white of the tablecloth under there, so. So we'll do the same thing over here. Yesterday when I put the bowl in, I don't know if I filmed it, but I used that same gray, just a little bit darker, and I went ahead and put in that metal screw cap. Okay, so I think the next thing for our block in will be this tablecloth. And I guess that's basically going to be white with the blue lines. So let me just put in a little undercoat of white, and then I will, and I'm going to draw these blue lines. Let me zoom in for you on this. I'm not going to try to paint all these tiny little checks. I'm going to, I'm using this paint that's on my palette. It's not real clean, but it's okay. In fact, I don't think you'd want it real white because there's so much shadow going on here, which will have to be put in. I guess I need to go ahead and do that. Now that I've gotten back from this painting, I think having this blue and white check adds a lot of interest. I don't think that reads very well, and I don't, even though that's how it is in the photograph, I think that looks kind of odd. So I think I'm going to bring out a point, maybe where you'll still have a fold, but that's going to come out a little bit. I think I like having some pink showing here, but I don't know. I'm going to put that point in, and then we're going to move on. I think we're getting pretty close to being finished with the undercoat. I need to put that in, and I need the little metal spout, maybe the little seeds. And it's like the blueberries. I don't really see the point in doing those at this point. I think I'm just going to wait and paint those in when I get to the oils. But let's see about this, what I can do here, just to kind of make that more interesting. So if it folded under, It's hard to know without a picture what would really happen to that, if that looks right or not. I've gotten to where I usually do my paintings. I don't have a microphone on, and I just do voiceovers or put in text boxes with information, but it's kind of nice. I feel like I'm painting with you, kind of talking to you, thinking out loud on some things. So I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to just draw in some lines. My paint's really drying out. I didn't use a Stay Wet palette. So let's just so the line doesn't look right. It looks like it's going downhill. It should be coming straight. Right. Oh, that's where it really helps to have a photograph instead of making up something like that. But it would be a point, wouldn't it? I have to get back from that. I may be editing some of this out. I don't want to wear you out with me trying to figure that out, but it would be probably a point. Oh, me. So you've got this fold, and then you would have a little point. And I think it would run more like that. The paint's getting really dry over here, but let's see. I think the point definitely looks better. I think that needs to have a little bit of a bump to it. So I like, yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not crazy about that. I think I'm going to address it when I get to the oils. Oh, and we're going to put that spigot in real quick. I'm just going back to our gray mixture. Maybe it's just too dry. Let's see if I can make some fresh. I decided it was looking a little too blank over here, so I've added in one more lemon, and I've put it just barely in front of the corner of this glass. And then I'm going to put a lot of blueberries in here. So I'm going to draw this one And I might even make it a little bit bigger even to go up over this. I just like the idea of things overlapping. So let me get that one in, and then we'll be ready for our oils. I decided that when I got back, I really like seeing this check, and I'm going to have to fix that. But I think instead of this being white, it would make more sense and be a little more interesting to have a check here as well. And, you know, instead of having a flat cloth, you can just do a line, do a little bump in it, and all of a sudden you've got some movement in that fabric. And I, you know, kind of just did a wavy line. There's another bump. So because there's a bump there, that means I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow here, and a little bit of a shadow here, and a little bit of a highlight in the middle. So just keeping that in mind. And I need to decide where, you know, what direction is that check going to run? Is it going to go straight across? Is it going to run this way? It might be, I was going to run it this way, but it might be more dramatic here to have it go up and down. That would give you even more of a feel for this movement in the fabric. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to pencil it in first. Well, I may just go ahead and use some paint. I've already put up my acrylics. So rather than getting my ultramarine and white out, I'm just going to use this light blue violet. And I'm just going to draw in some lines. Even put my water up, so I'm just going to moisten my brush here with the spray bottle. So here's this light blue violet. Ugh, just love that color. But again, this is going to be painted over because we're still in the acrylic stage. So let's just see what would happen. And see if we kind of like what's happening with that. I think that's pretty. I think that gives you a nice effect. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw this in all the way across. I'm not going to be too precise about it. I want to keep this really loose too. I want the lines to be a little uneven. Nothing too precise. You notice the hump is getting less than it was at the front. So you'll have more of a curve at the front, a little less at the back. So, well, you may want to continue to watch this. I don't know. I don't want to presume that. So I'm just trying to get these equally spaced. You know, if this was really in the distance, these lines would get a little closer together as they go back. So I want to be mindful of that. And so we're also going to have some lines showing through. We could even do this as a stripe and that as a check. I don't mind that at all. You notice I didn't get that even, but that might have been a happy accident because the glass is going to distort things. So I might just leave that until I go back over it with the oil. Okay, I'm liking that. Isn't that funny how just something that small, all of a sudden now there's some interest over here with very little effort, really. I'm going to go ahead and draw these in. I had a little trouble. You know, I made this corner up. I was having a little trouble getting these lines in right. So when I get my whites out, I'll fix that. Okay, my friends, I think we are ready. I think we have officially finished the block in. I might just put some marks in since I have this paint out, just to get a feel. I want the blueberries to be interestingly spaced. I don't want them lined up. I don't want to, you know, I want some of them to overlap, so you'd have one in front of the other. I want it to look like they were spilled, not like someone put them out in perfect order. So I'm just going to continue to drop some of these in. And I'd like to have a few over here as well. The ones back in here might be a little darker. Yeah, I think that's nice. So I'm trying to do them in little clusters. Just trying to get something kind of interesting. And I'm kind of pointing your eye up in to the painting, hopefully. I like having where it looks like there a little pile and then a few of them that kind of ran away. I like having that little sense of whimsy there. Okay, and of course these blueberries will have a light side and a dark side. Okay, I'm going to get out my oil paints and we'll see what we're going to work on next. Okay, I'm getting ready to do the lemons in oil, and I'm just going to use two colors. I've got Cad Yellow Medium and I have Raw Sienna, and of course some Titanium White. And I went ahead and mixed some of my Liquid Original into my white. The white that I have is kind of old and stiff, and it's just easier for me to go, since I'm using white in so many of these items, but I've also got some liquid on my palette. So I'm just going to go, I'm going to start out first in these areas where I want the strongest yellow. Up at the top, we're going to add some white to that. You'll notice I'm using one of my Rosemary & Company brushes, soft brush. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the Raw Sienna and a little bit of the yellow, and mix those together and get a nice little transition color right here. And then I'll go even darker down at the bottom. And I'm just very softly with my brush pushing that darkest color back up into the color that's above it. I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to dip back in to some yellow and white. And I'm going to put a little more white and just get a highlight on there. So right here on the end, we've got that little piece that juts out. So I want that to look a little highlighted on top and a little darker on the bottom. Just a little bitty mark. I'm going to go back, I've wiped my brush off, and I'm just going to go back and soften that edge. That's the thing that I love the most about oils, is you can get such a beautiful transition and blend. If you feel like you've gotten this too dark, you can put some more yellow in and just push it back down. If it's too light, you can put some dark and push it back up. But I think I'm good with that. So I'm going to move on to these other lemons. I probably will speed this up I don't know that you're going to want to watch me do all of them, but that's how I'm doing it. And they're so super easy, and I think they're real effective. It's a great place to show light and shadow, and it's just easy to do. On this one, I'm going to get it super light right here, then go back into the yellow. This one is staying fairly dark except on this one edge because it's in such shadow. But my biggest mistake when I used to paint lemons is I just got them too bright and too perky, and they just didn't look realistic. So that's not going to happen to us, right? And this is fairly pale. Just going to stay with the same colors. I'm going to start primarily white with just a touch of that yellow and see what we can get. It's definitely whiter in one part than another. And then this little edge around is pretty white. So this is sort of a decision point for me in wanting to keep things loose. Do I try to do this white edge in something that ragged, or do I drop down to something a little more precise? And I think I'm going to drop down to this little flat brush. This is a Princeton Bright Summit size 4. And I'm just going to drop into the pure white. May take some passes to get my pencil marks covered. So this might be something I'll come back to later in the painting and touch up. If you get that edge too wide, you can always come back later with the yellow and push it out. I may have to do that. There was a temptation to get a little round brush, but I can see if I did that, I would really clamp down on it and get a really precise line. At least by using a flat, I can only get it so round, and again, just trying to keep that looser look. There's some little section lines. So I'm just going to take, this is a fairly chiseled brush. I'm just going to put the tip of it. So you can see I can get a fairly chiseled line with that. And I'm just going to, I'm going to put the center in first. And then I'm going to put in these chiseled. Having to wipe my brush because it's picking up the yellow. You could wait until that dried a little bit. But see, I like the fact that these are irregular. I like the fact that they're just not the same. I would caution you though, be mindful of the angle of these. Okay, and I think that's enough. I don't think, because we're keeping it loose, I don't think we need to do much more than that. I'm going to move over to this big lemon on the left, and then we'll start on something else. I think I had mentioned earlier that I would like to be able to incorporate a little cad orange into this painting, and I was thinking mainly in the watermelon. I don't want to add white to it and get it too chalky looking. I'd rather use yellows and oranges to lighten this red. And to me, this lemon is looking a little dull, and I thought adding some cad orange to it might be a way to just put a little color in there in the shadows. So I'm going to try that. If I don't like it, we can always just take it off. So I'm going to take a little bit of this cad orange, and I'm going to mix it with the yellow. I might get a little bit of that medium on there. I think putting just the pure orange might be too dark, but let's just see. I think that's giving a nice glow and a nice shadow, and it's keeping this a little more colorful. Yeah, I like that a lot. So I'm probably going to add a little orange. Let me let you see. Up in this group, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to drop, I'm putting very little pressure on there, but just putting a little orange in there. Just keeping this a little more colorful, a little more interesting. Particularly right here where I don't have much of a shadow, letting the orange be more of the shadow rather than the raw sienna. I think that's very pretty. I'm just pushing that back a little bit. A little more orange right in there. Gosh, I really like that a lot. Orange is a great way to kind of give a glow to something too. I think that's really pretty. And it's going to give good color harmony when I add a little bit of orange to that watermelon. You might even not even realize looking at this that that's orange in there because your brain is thinking lemon. But it's a great way to just build some color harmony and keep your painting a little more interesting and colorful, whimsical. Yep, I like that a lot better. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this watermelon. Let me check my camera here, get you in for a close-up. So the goal here with this watermelon is to get this to look juicy and wet, highlighted. But again, if I put white in with my rose, it's just going to get, it's going to turn pink and it's going to turn chalky looking. So I'm going to use this Winsor & Newton Permanent Rose as my main color. Got way too much on my palette just then. So I've got that, I've got my orange, and I've got my yellow. And I'm going to try to do this watermelon just using those three colors. maybe using a tiny bit of white along that outside edge just to show some moisture, but I'm going to try to get my main lightness with the orange. So let's just drop some of this in and see how that looks. It's a beautiful color, and it is fairly dark, but the watermelon is fairly dark around the bottom and in the center. So I'm using the same Rosemary & Company brush that's so scruffy. Now in this next area, it's slightly lighter, so I'm going to take some of this rose, I'm going to take a little bit of that orange and just mix them together. That's probably too much, and put a little more of the rose in there and see if we like that. So again, the goal is to lighten it without it getting chalky. I'm going to try adding just a little bit of yellow to that same mixture, and let's see what that does. Just to use that around that outside edge where we know we're getting more light. I'm going to take a little yellow, I'm going to drop it right into that, just alongside those outside edges. Kind of blend it in. I don't want it to look like a yellow streak, but adding a little bit more red back into this pile as we get closer to the bottom. Now I'm going back into just the pure rose. I think that's nice. That gives it a nice little glow. I'm going to go back in. Right here, there was a little dark place. I think by adding in a little dark, it also makes this look a little lighter. So I'm gonna go over this bottom again, just darkening that a little bit more. I think these dark corners are just too dark. I'm going to see if I can just pull some of that back off. All right, so let me just hit that again with our paint that's a little more orange. Believable. Again, a very ragged brush that I'm using here, not anything precise. Okay. I think once we put the seeds in, that's going to make a lot more sense. I'm going to go back over this rind. That's really smearing right there, but it doesn't really bother me. Let me do this one more time. I think while I've got so much white out, I'm going to work on these gray areas, the plate, the bowl, the background, this tablecloth, and just go over them. I think I might make this a little whiter. I want to put some reflections like of this. Let's go ahead and do that. Some reflections up in this bowl of that watermelon. It's just barely there. Doesn't have to be anything super great, but just soft. I'm just kind of softening that lightly, kind of scrubbing that in. I like that there's a deeper place and a lighter place. So let me go back. I'm going to make basically the same gray as I did before. I'm probably not going to film all that. It's not going to be terribly exciting. But I am going to maybe throw a little of the blue reflection, maybe a little of the yellow reflection up in this bowl. I'm going to go over this plate, just kind of mix up some fresh colors, going over it pretty much just like we have. Let me mention this as well. I think one of the other things that I'm going to do right now, since we've used the rose and the orange in the watermelon, we've got some orange in the lemons now. I'm going to use the rose and the orange and a ton of white to do the tablecloth. And I'm just going to see what I can come up with that's close to this. It's obviously going to have a lot of white in it. And I might start laying that in. I feel like I kind of need this color in. I want to work around the painting. In other words, I don't want to just do one thing. I feel like I kind of need to work around the painting a little bit. So I'm going to play with those colors and see what I can come up with there. So I took a little orange and a little red and put a lot of white in it. Came up with this really strong coral pinky color, but I think it's beautiful. But I'm primarily using this lighter color, and I'm just dropping it in. And I'm going to just steer clear around the blueberries. We can use this darker color as the shadow, perhaps, underneath. Under here. So that's the decision to make. Do we get away from the blue shadows? Do we stick with that? I'm not sure. Let me go ahead and just fill this in and get back. And I am dipping my brush in different little piles. I didn't mix this very well, as you can see, because I don't want it to look like a solid color. I want it to have some variety to it. It's very pretty though. It's nice color harmony, I think. So I used my same combination of ultramarine blue, the raw sienna, and white, and it's a little bit different. I could make it grayer, make it lighter, but I like this color that I've come up with, so it's slightly different than what's underneath it, but I like it, and so I'm going to proceed with that. So again, I'm going back to a very rough brush. It's shedding a little bit. Try to pull those hairs off as soon as you see them before they get baked in. So because this is a little bluer, this is going to keep the painting a little more colorful, I think, which I like. I'm going to get slightly darker on this side, just so we get the sense that that is a bowl that has turned. I'm going to go ahead and do this side while I've got my paint. I like getting a little more contrast around that lemon. So now I'm going to go back to my lighter color, and I'm going to just work that back in. You might have to wipe your brush off, get the dark. I'm just very, very lightly kind of joining those two spaces, really super light. Barely touching that. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, that's up to you how smooth you want to get it, but and then I'm going to get a little lighter on this side. So I'm just taking the same color and I'm going to just mix some pure white. Excuse me, I have a brush in my mouth. So I might even just put some pure white. I've still got this color on my brush, and then I put some pure white on there, and it's doing a nice job of just mixing on its own. I might do that again, just some pure white up here around that top edge and this outside edge. Now I'm going to go in and soften. That's just looking too much like a square, so I'm going to go in and take a lot of this out. I'm going to take the white and I'm going to push it in. Well, that's already gotten kind of dry. Well, I might have to push it out then. But I just want to blur that and soften that. Now I'm pulling some white over top of it. can always go back, just put a little more white over top of that again. Just keep softening that. And I just went over my white of my lemon. And the pencil lines are still really showing. I'm going to have to address that later on when that dries a little bit. In the photograph, we see this blue reflecting up, so I guess we need to decide if we're going to do the shadows blue, and I think we are. So I'm going to take some of just the, let's try just some pure ultramarine, and let's see what that does in here. Wow. I like getting that super dark line right along the bottom of that plate, and then we'll lighten it as it pulls out. But wow, doesn't that help define that really nicely? So now I'm going to go in and just add a little white to this ultramarine. You can even kind of mix it on the canvas. And then I'm going to add just a little more white and get this outside edge so that that shadow line is getting a little lighter the farther away it moves from the plate. All right, so right here is where we're seeing a little of the blue. So I'm just really barely touching that. There's a little yellow reflecting up in here. I'm going to get a clean brush for that. And I'm not going to go into that pure yellow. I'm just going to take our yellow and white combination with this super soft brush. And I'm just going to lightly, I am barely, I might put a little bit right there, which is not in the photograph, but I think it makes more sense that there would be a reflection from both of them. Okay. Fun, fun. Reflections are fun. You know, if you just do what you see, don't worry about if it makes sense. Just do what you see. I think after this dries a little bit, I'm going to go in and put a little dark shadow in there and put a little white highlight, but I just feel like I need to let that dry a little bit. Now let me work on this plate. I'm going to have to drop down to a much smaller brush. This is when it's kind of nice having a wide variety of brushes, so you're not having to clean them. So on this whitest edge, I'm taking some pure white and I'm going into this gray. I'm going to exaggerate these whites a little more than they are in the photograph because I feel like they're just not showing up enough, and I want us to get a good noticeable sheen. down to this other gray that I have. This is where having that road map with the values ahead of time helps a lot. I'm not having to figure that out as I go. That's already been done. This is just the pure ultramarine. What a beautiful color. I'm so grateful for ultramarine. It's just so beautiful for shadows and mountains. It's a nice way to darken colors without adding black or getting something too dull looking. It's just one of those favorites. I always have that on my palette. Okay. I do think I'm going to need this ultramarine for the shadows around the tablecloths. Shall we try to fix this mess? I do have a bit of a mess going right there. Let me see if I can. I'm going to go back in this same, I guess I'm going to take this same gray that I used for the bowl, and I'm going to add some white to it for this tablecloth. I'm going to have to clean my brush again. I think it would help my brain to get the white in first. I'm going to go a little bit darker right there because we're in a shadow. So even shadows within fabric can make a lot of difference in how something reads. I'm going to let this be pure white because that's really catching the light. I'm not trying to be super precise. I mean, I want it to read correctly, but I'm not going to fuss with it too much. I think it's okay for things to kind of drop off or not be too precise. Because that is curving under a little bit, I did that in this light gray, and then I'm going to go back to my white for these areas that are catching more light. It's funny what just a subtle shift in a color can do. And this is looking way too dark. Let's see if I can lighten that up. I would include this photograph for you to copy and download, but it's a photograph that I purchased from iStock. You can go on there and if you want to download it. I usually use Paint My Photo, or I take my own reference photos. I usually don't pay for my references, but lately I have found a couple of photos on there that I just felt like I had to have, so I just paid for them. While I've got this out, I think I'm going to go over and do this other cloth. And I'm going to use the pure white again where this would be catching the light. There's a little bit of a highlight there. And then I'll drop back to our little soft gray on either side. I think it's a lot of fun to, when you're doing this sort of painting, to be able to get that illusion of things moving and flowing just by the slightest little shadow difference. It's nice having that underpainting under there too. If I don't, you know, if I miss a little spot, it doesn't really show. Once I get these blueberries painted in, I'll also be putting some shadows. Oops, some pink on there. You know, I'll be doing a shadow on the tablecloth for the lemon, a shadow for the glass. But I think I'm just going to get the cloth in first. Wow. That red is pretty strong, isn't it? I have to deal with some pencil marks up here trying to get those covered. So I've gotten back from the painting, which I like to do periodically to see what I like and what I don't like. I like the idea of the blue and white check on the right side. I think this little stripe looks a little boring compared to that, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a check. I think the watermelon, I don't like the color of it. It looks so solid and a hard red. It's not a lush pinky red. So I have a naphthol red and a quinacridone magenta, which I think that one might work. So I'm going to try that again. And what else am I going to do? Then I might work on that background a little bit and then come back to the foreground. So I'm just kind of moving around the painting. I like the way the jar and the water and everything is looking. I haven't really worked on that water yet. I'll be working on that as well. But I feel like the plate, I feel like the shadow underneath the watermelon looks odd. It looks like the watermelon's sitting up, like maybe my drawing isn't quite right. So those are just some things I'm going to tweak, and just wanting to make this a little more interesting and a little more sparkly. I think the watermelon, because there are not any highlights on it, it's looking just kind of like a dead red triangle in the middle of this painting. It's not full of life. So I'm going to work on that next, see if I can't perk that up. So I took the naphthol crimson and I mixed it in with the tablecloth color, and I got this, and I thought that was really pretty. So I'm gonna try that again. I'm sorry, it's the quinacridone magenta that I'm using, which is this real, that's why you need to wear gloves. Shoot. It's this real purpley red, which was way too dark. But I've mixed some of that in with it, with a little white. I don't want to get this thing so thick with paint that it's doesn't look right. And I felt like I was using a smaller brush. I felt like I needed a bigger brush. I thought I would like that kind of orange little glow to. I've used orange on a watermelon before that I really liked it, but I'm not liking it in this painting, in this setting for some reason. It does get pretty light up there at the top, so I've just added a little more white. Let's just see how that does. Let me get back from that. Well, put some stronger highlights on there. Sometimes just some bigger strokes can liven something up. And then when I put the seeds in, there's some little highlights around those seeds, so that might help as well. And there are actually some highlights down at the bottom where I've gotten it darker at the bottom, but it's actually lighter at the bottom. So let me... Okay, I'm liking that better. Alrighty. Okay, I think this is too dark. I think I need to work on this rind and pull it deeper in, but I just don't want to mess with that, dragging that blue up through that white plate while this is still wet. So I'm going to let this watermelon dry. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is work on this mottled background. I've got some sap green, cadmium green. We've got our original yellow, orange, that blue-gray mixture, and some white. So I'm just going to try scrubbing in some different things. I want to keep the lemonade bottle pretty light and this pretty light, but I might get some darker things back up in the corners. I don't know. I'm going to go back to one of these big brushes that's been well loved and worn. Looks like it's been gnawed on. I'm going to try to put these layers on, maybe not super thick. And I'm just going to kind of mix some different things together. I'm not going to worry about getting them heavily mixed. And just get some variety, see what we come up with. Drop a little orange in there. That might get too muddy. I went ahead and put in a little bit of the blue tablecloth in the back, and I think that having that check everywhere helps. I'm going to go in and put the seeds in and the watermelon. I don't have a jet black, but I've got something that's kind of a really dark brown. And I'm going to use this little filbert brush and see how that does. Just try to put a little mark and leave it alone. That little rounded tip is nice for that. So where you can kind of press into it and get a little mark and then pull up and it looks more like a seed. Yep, I'm liking that. That's pretty much how they are in the photograph, but I think just from a painting standpoint, it would look better to have them a little bigger. So I'm going to do that. So I'm just putting a little pressure on it. And then as I pull down, I'm pulling up, releasing the pressure to get a little bit of a point there. It's a lot of fun when it's going well, I must say. Oh, me. I think I might even do another one right there, a small one. Okay. You know, if I had this to do over again, I might consider using not doing the acrylic underneath, but using some kind of transparent oil, and then doing another coat over top to try to get it a little more translucent looking. This just looks so solid to me. But let's see what we can do about that. So I'm going to take a little of my white and this quinacridone. I'm about to run out of space here, and just a little bit of this quinacridone magenta, a lot of white, and let's just this is a nice little brush to get a thin line. You know, it looks pretty purpley pink. I'm just getting the line a little thicker and then letting it get a little thinner. I'm just kind of using the sides, almost a dry brush technique, just trying to lightly drag in this feeling of sheen here and there, trying to do it uneven. I'm still not crazy about it, and it's one of those things. I usually will keep messing with something, and I will with this until I get it fixed, but I'm just not sure how to fix it. I don't like how that's looking. I feel like going back to that original thought of adding some orange. Let me try some orange with the white, which kind of gets us more to this sort of tabletop. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop a little of this kind of orange combo that's just the pink and the orange. And I'm going to go back to more of a scrubby kind of brush. And I'm going to go back with a little bit more of the magenta. And let's just see if we kind of, just kind of lightly scrubbing that over that orange, and just to see. May not work, it may, I don't know. This is one of those things, this is really my process when I'm, you know, I've done watermelon before and I really liked it, but I did it in acrylic. I don't think I've ever done one in oils. So I'm kind of just softening that, dragging some pink back up into that place at the top. I'm going to be careful not to hit my seeds there that are still wet. Get back and look. I think it's really important to get back and look as often as you can. Get away from it. That's looking better, but it looks a little chalky to me. I feel like it needs some white sparkles on it. So let's just try a white sparkle or two. And let's just, so I have some white just barely on this Philip brush. This in the well, I'm very sad to say I did all the film as I painted these blueberries, and there was nothing on the film when I loaded it on my computer. It was just blank. So I thought it would be pretty tacky for you to have watched this whole video that's about blueberries and get to the blueberries part and not be able to see it. So I'm going to repaint these using some multimedia paper so you can see it. But I wanted to show you the shadow color. I used a darker version of the table. Instead of using the blue, because the blueberries were blue, it would be hard to distinguish the shadows. I did use a blue shadow when they were on the tablecloth. And I thought that was nice. But when we dropped down to the coral color, I just did a darker red, and I thought that looked really nice. So let me show you using a multimedia pad how I did these. I want you to notice that I scattered these. In other words, I would put two together and then an odd one. I would have them in odd numbers. I had them overlapping and just scattered. I wanted it to look like they had been spilled and had rolled into an irregular pattern. So that's what I did. Let me show you how I did those. I'm using a Princeton Catalyst poly tip brush. It's a size 6. It's a round brush. It's very stiff and it's pretty worn. I'm using ultramarine blue with a little liquid medium in there, just the pure ultramarine, and I'm putting the back side of the blueberry. The light source is coming from the left, and I'm kind of putting them out randomly. I'm just doing a little half circle, depending on where the light is. If the light was above, you would have the dark part more on the bottom, but because the light's on the left, the shadow is on the right. Now I'm mixing a little bit of white, and I'm coming up with a medium value, and I'm just going in and making that more round. And blueberries are a little irregular shaped, so I was trying to do them very quickly. In the painting, I did them very quickly. I didn't want them to look precise. I didn't go back and rework them. I just did it as quickly as I could. I wanted some of them to look like they were laying at different angles, so the fact that some of them looked a little wonky was actually a good thing. Then I took more white, mainly white, but still with a little bit of blue, and I just did a little highlight on that outer rim. It's amazing how quickly you can give something form just by having a dark, a medium, and a light value. And, you know, blueberries have a little funny top. It looks like a little something exploded out of the top of it. So in order to do that, I used just the pure ultramarine blue, and I put a little bit on the tip of that brush, and I just put a little vertical mark sticking out of that blueberry. Some of them I did it right in the middle so it would look like the blueberry was on its side. Some I had sticking up at different angles, but super, super easy to do, and I think very effective. It reads like a blueberry. I just love the effect of this, and the fact that that brush is a little ragged. It's, I call them well loved. It's pretty worn, but it helps give that sort of ragged little space. And just be sure to keep it, put it at different spots on the blueberry to make them look like they're at different angles. I did go back in and fill a couple of those in where I just felt like they didn't look round at all, but overall, try to keep it just super loose if you can. And then the other thing that you can do is put a shadow on the table for each blueberry. There I am, just putting in a little, one single little highlight that's just pure white. And here you see the finished blueberries where I had added a little extra dark blue to the right just to give it a shadow effect. Like I say, in the painting, I used a red for the tabletop, but any kind of shadow will work. And there you have the simple blueberries. While I've got this pink out, I feel like the pink, we've got it in the straw and here and here. I'd like to have a little bit of pink someplace else. I know we dropped some orange into the lemons, but I feel like it would be good just to have that pink showing up someplace else. So I might take some of this little coral color that I just mixed. Just put a little hit here and there. Doesn't have to be anything much, but just to use it one more time. I keep wanting to put some pink up in here. Let's maybe even on this lid. You know, it doesn't take much just to repeat that color. I think is pretty. I like that a lot better. Maybe in the back of this vase or jar. Might even put a little hit of pink on some of these blueberries, maybe. Okay, I think I'm now at that point of getting back from the painting and figuring out what I like and I don't like. I am not excited about this background. And as I've been thinking about it, one thought is to let this dry a little bit and then put in the background just this sense that there are like some rose bushes or something way in the background. I don't want to take away from this, but there's just so much of this. To me, it's just a little too much. I might try darkening some of these spots and see if that helps. I might try to define this little lid a little bit more or leave it. I just haven't decided. So let me live with that and I'll be back. One of the last things that I'm going to do, I want to work on that jar and do some things to make it look more like glass. I'm going to have some things following the bent of the glass. I want to make this look a little more distinctive. I'm going to put some highlights going in front of some things. So I don't know that I'm going to be talking through it, but I'm just going to be, I don't have in my photo reference, it's that diamond glass, which I just don't even want to attempt to do that. So I don't really have good sheen, but there is sheen right through here. I'm just going to try to make this look a little more believable. And then maybe let this back dry a little bit more. Maybe go ahead and try to add a little darker pieces back there. But I think I am going to try to add some flowers there on a different day. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and probably just put some music to it. So I tried the smaller flowers over on the right side, not crazy about that. And what I'm trying on the left side is taking my brush and literally just rolling it. I've got a mixture of the orange and the rose and some white, and I'm just rolling my brush around. I think I like that. It's very abstract, keeps everything pushed into the background. So let me experiment with that a little bit. I think I like it better than these little dabs. So let me let you look at the dabby area. Let me just go over that. Just got a fair amount of pressure, just turning the brush, pulling it, just trying to get some different shapes. And I like the fact that I've got some different colors on my brush. I didn't use just a solid color. I think that's kind of pretty. Let me play with that a little bit. So I love taking that tabletop color and pushing it back to the flowers, using it again. So I've used it 3 times, 3 big times. I think that looks fabulous. And I ended up adding sap green and ultramarine blue to the background. And wow, look what that did. It just made all those things on the table jump forward. I ended up putting some green in between the flowers in that background, kind of broke that up a little bit. Just love it. I love the whimsy of this. I love the blue and white. I'm glad I went ahead and put that plaid in. I think the lemonade reads like lemonade. And I think the dark background, gosh, what a difference that made. That light background just was not doing it. Just absolutely love it. I think our watermelon is finally glistening a little bit. Love the reflections in the bowl. Wow, this was one of those paintings that was so much fun. I really hated to see it come to an end, but I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I appreciate your time.